The economic uncertainty index is 3 times higher right now than it was during COVID.
So the three best performing markets right now.
Mortgage rates that start with a 3 are seen as a psychological turning point for would-be home buyers.
You only get one chance to buy or sell your next home. Let's get it right.
October is here.
We're back
already. And this is going to be more of a data heavy, real estate on tap today. And the reason for that is because number one, there hasn't been a lot of crazy stuff that's been happening lately, but I don't know about you. We're finding a lot of people really just like trying to time the market, right? Like you're seeing that a lot when you're helping people buy homes.
Yeah. And then even some of the phone calls we get, like, I want to anecdotally say everyone who we've been talking to, they're in that 2 to 6 month range of like, we'll see where the market's going to go. You know, we're going to see who's going to qualify, how they're going to qualify, and then maybe we'll see what the spring is going to entail. Because right now, just like you said, it's been in status quo for as long as I can remember it. The season. So,
well, it's gonna be interesting because there's been so much stuff that's come out lately, and there's even been signs that maybe things are changing. All right, and we've got our anecdotal stories. I know, like lately, we've had a ton of people coming out of the woodwork that are more kind of getting into like the entry level, like their first place sort of thing. Typically condominiums and whatnot, looking to get into that sort of stuff. And actually, we've even had our listings for condominiums have been by far the busiest, right? Some of them have gone into multiple offers. Like it's been interesting to watch because that's typically the start of the market, right? Those are typically the people coming back and getting involved. So I know you pulled some really interesting things. I pulled some really interesting things for today's video. So, I mean, the real question is, what are we drinking?
Yeah, or have it. That's it.
Forget all the numbers.
That's it. You know, we're going back to some of our favorites. It's Parallel 49. It's their craft lager. It's been around. It's been a staple for everyone. It's been in your fridge at least once in your lifetime.
And it's always good, and it tastes good, and it's cold. So we will take it. Okay, well, I guess. Why don't you start? Like, I know you were talking about when you were pulling these, that number one, we need to kind of shake some of the broad brushes that we paint what we call the market with. Yeah. Number one question is, how's the market?
Yeah, that's the number one question that I hear is, how's that market?
Yeah.
Where is the market going to go? That's the other one too.
But that is the big one. People want us to tell them what the future looks like.
They don't have crystal balls, unfortunately.
No, but maybe we'll give some insight on that a little bit today. But yeah, I thought it was interesting what you pulled. So what you've pulled is markets for different kind of property types and whatnot. So there's different, we talked about, broad brushes painting, calling it the market. Well, there's different types of properties, different price points of properties. There's different locations of properties. And even doing this, we're still somewhat doing a little bit of a broad stroke, but this is, I think, going to be interesting because there's opportunities that exist for buyers out there and there's opportunities that exist for sellers out there. And that's going to surprise a lot of people either watching or listening to this, right? And we're going to post some of this on our Instagram channel as well. So we're going to actually have some of the graphics on our Instagram channel. So if people are listening to this on the Real Estate on Tap podcast, make sure you look in the show notes and you can find our, really specific Instagram channel, more kind of designated to Self-Storey and White Rock more than anything. But we think we'll put this on there. It'll be pretty interesting. But tell me a little bit. So you've got 3 different property types here. What are the markets for detached homes where buyers have really good opportunity, meaning sellers are having a really big challenge?
Yeah, so how we got these numbers, we should maybe go there. So we talk about this big sexy term called the sales to active ratio. So how many homes come to the market, sell, as opposed to them just sitting on the market. So obviously the higher that number, the more in demand that area is, therefore there drives the price up or it drives it down.
Right. So like 30% would be roughly one to three.
Correct.
Houses. Okay.
So what I did here was I took what is we'll say the quote unquote highest sales to active ratio. So some of the ratios where there's actually going to be a lot of, we'll say, competition. So anything above roughly 20% is a seller's market. So the more people who are buying, there's less inventory, therefore more homes come to the market, sell, therefore the higher that number.
So these would be markets where sellers actually have favor over buyers.
That's right.
So the homes are selling quicker, days on market is maybe a little bit shorter. Prices even could be going up in markets like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, interesting.
So what I'll do just to make it easy is I'll go the best performing markets. So the ones that are the highest percentage, and then maybe we'll save the what's good for the buyers towards the end. Sure. So we'll start off with detached homes. So we have 4 main areas that we have here, and then we have all of the sub areas that fall within the area. So just to make it nice and easy, I'll give you the best area, and then I'll give you 3 of the best sub markets, and then we'll go from there. So the 3 best performing markets right now is Walnut Grove, Brookswood, and Murrayville.
Walnut Grove is always in there for some reason.
I know it.
Okay, so sorry, Walnut Grove, Brookswood, and Murrayville.
And all 3 of them fall in Langley.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Very. And Langley is number 2 behind Cloverdale in a general as a whole.
Right, for like the so sellers generally in those 3 sub areas, in those like kind of like smaller kind of niche communities sort of thing, generally speaking, are actually maybe prices are going up. They're having a much better experience than a lot of the other market because those buyers are finding those markets attractive for whatever reason.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll go into now the 3 buyer opportunities markets.
Okay.
So we have Royal Heights, White Rock, and Elgin Chantrell in severe buyer markets right now.
Yeah, and the South Story White Rock market, generally speaking, has been one of the more challenged markets as a whole for all different product types. So that kind of fits that bill.
Yeah, lowest in the area here is South Story and White Rock.
Royal Heights, for people that don't know, is kind of like on your way down to the Patello Bridge sort of thing as you're going up Scott Road, kind of general area. That's kind of where that is. Okay, so that's detached homes. What about townhomes?
Yeah. So townhomes, 2 of the same from detached, but one is a little bit different, but in the same area. So we have Murrayville, Walnut Grove, and Alder Grove are the 3 for townhomes.
Interesting. We're Langley.
Yeah, that's right. And so
Those are in benefit of the seller.
correct. That's right. And now the buyer opportunities for townhomes, White Rock, Morgan Creek. Interesting about Brookswood, but there's not too many townhomes within Brookswood, so we can see how that could be a little bit lower.
I even have to think about where townhome and Brookswood might be. They might be on the border, but
Totally.
yeah, okay.
But Morgan Creek and White Rock both fall within White Rock. So
I'm actually surprised the Grandview neighborhood's not in there too, because Grandview's been traditionally pretty difficult for the last couple months. But okay, so lots of opportunity for buyers to take advantage of the market conditions in those, and then sellers are taking advantage of the market conditions more in Langley.
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And then last but not least, we have condos. So the 3 top performing areas are Morgan Creek, which there's not a ton in there.
Right.
We have Walnut Grove and we have Sunnyside Park. So that's a little bit closer down to like 20th and 150th or 152. And for the 3 buyer opportunities, we have Wally, Bolivar Heights, and King George Corridor.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, we know the Wally, downtown Surrey condo market
getting beat up
pretty hard, getting beat up pretty hard. Interesting. So, I think one of the neat takeaways from that is not every market is performing the same. And there's different opportunities for different people buying different things in different areas. So it's really important to get local data like that. So it just goes to show like, you can't paint that broad brush.
The market whole is a slow, but you could say specific areas are more dominant or more subservient towards.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And now I'm going to go blow that all up and paint everything with very broad brush. And here's why I'm going to do that. There were some articles that have come out recently, and I'm going to keep kind of narrowing it down. I'm going to bring this all to a kind of a head here. But we anecdotally have noticed a little bit of a change. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. For sure.
Okay. So, and we were talking about that at the start of this, actually, about like the kind of the entry level piece of the market, like those condominiums and whatnot. We have noticed more foot traffic, more people booking showings, more people looking at them, more offers, more interest, I would say, more people putting their hand up saying it's maybe time to start looking at buying. So I was trying to kind of wrap my head around that and say, well, is there anything to kind of back this up? Is there any data? And data, I think, in the environment we're in right now, like what you've done is data, but actually saying why it's happening is a little more challenging. But there's been some articles released lately, 2 of which were in the Globe and Mail, which I'm going to share, that I just thought were really, really interesting. And then I'm going to back it up with some local data. So let me kind of talk about one here. The first one says is titled, I'll make sure these are linked below, Falling Interest Rates Expected to Break Psychological Barrier for Home Buyers, experts say. So we've been in an environment now where rates have come down. We've got another rate announcement likely at the end of this month. Who knows what's going to happen? And we don't need to necessarily predict because it seems to change every day. But we did have a rate adjustment or a rate reduction come out last time the Bank of Canada met, right? So what this article goes on to say is it says with the Bank of Canada cutting its benchmark interest rate to 2.5%, lenders are expected to offer mortgages that could soon be in the 3% range instead of hovering above 4%. Okay. Loans are only slightly cheaper, but mortgage rates that start with a 3 are seen as a psychological turning point for would-be home buyers. You know, does that match kind of what we've been seeing? I don't know. It goes on to just kind of explain that a little bit. It says from the 2009 global recession until the start of the pandemic in 2020, the average interest rate on the popular 5-year mortgage was in the 3% range, which is more typical of the last decade, opposed to rates above 4% that we've been seeing in recent years. This is getting back to what buyers consider normal and will likely motivate them to enter the real estate market. So that's Article 1. Take it for what it is, right? But there's no doubt things get cheaper. There's more opportunity created, right?
Yeah.
I actually kind of think that's why we're seeing that extra traffic that we're seeing is there's certain people in segments of the market where they said, well, hey, you know, prices have come down and money's a little cheaper to borrow from the banks right now. And I'm maybe starting to see a little bit of opportunity that didn't exist a year ago. And I know that's part of a conversation I've had with a lot of people that we sat with and kind of brought on to work together with. So the next one is from the Canadian Real Estate Association, it's from Globe and Mail, but it quotes them quite a bit in the Canadian Real Estate Association. So September home sales are up 5%. This is nationally. So broad stroke, right? Broad stroke brushes, I said not to do. But as the Real Estate Association expects strong end to the year. So what are they saying in here? Well, the Canadian Real Estate Association has upgraded its forecast for home sales in 2025. So we're not talking about prices here. We're talking about home sales, saying it now expects a softer decline this year as activity continues to rebound. So we've seen activity all across Canada, generally speaking, not every single market, but generally speaking, has improved and improved and improved. September home sales were up 5.2% from a year ago. Guess what we didn't have a year ago? We didn't have tariff talk. We didn't have President Donald Trump in. We didn't have all these things. Home sales were 5.2% up from a year ago. That's pretty interesting.
That is, yeah.
That's marking the most activity for the month since 2021.
Wow.
Okay. So it goes on to say, it said it still expects decreases in activity in BC, Alberta, Ontario, offsetting gains throughout the rest of the country. So again, this is a federal article. But they go on to say with 3 years of pent-up demand still out there and more nominal or normal interest rates finally here, the forecast continues to be further upward momentum in home sales over the final quarter of this year and into 2026. CREA said it now forecasts national home sales in 2026 to rebound by 7.7%. The national average home price is expected to increase 3.2% from 2025 into next year. So these kind of go together a little bit, right? Like they kind of complement each other. Now, broad strokes, right? I want to kind of rein this in a little bit more because the people watching this are likely in British Columbia, they're likely in the Fraser Valley or the Greater Vancouver area. So I've got another report here. Okay, we're just reiterating reports here today, but it all ties together, I promise. Economics Market Intelligence Report. This is from the British Columbia Real Estate Association. I really enjoyed reading this one. It's called What Comes After Uncertainty, the Next Phase in BC's Housing Market. So it's arguable that a lot of what we've been experiencing since the start of this year, where actually home sales were like way up and it was looking like it was going to be a very, very busy year right up until about February. New president in the United States, tariff talk, everything changed, right? That's no surprise to a lot of people listening. So what this report goes on to talk about is uncertainty. And they actually reference that you can't really measure uncertainty. There is actual ways that they try and do it. Is it the right way to do it? No, who knows? But there is something called an economic policy uncertainty index. And I'm going to pop that on the screen here for anybody watching the YouTube video. But to give you a perspective for those listening, the economic uncertainty index is 3 times higher right now than it was during COVID.
That's crazy.
During a global pandemic.
That's crazy.
Okay, so people are obviously pretty curious, or maybe curious isn't the right word, concerned about what might happen out there, or they have been anyways, because it's actually started to come down. Okay, It goes on to say, what is uncertainty? Uncertainty is not inherently measurable. It's much more of a vibe or a mood than something that can be quantified. This means we are left to rely on imperfect measures to gauge people's sentiment about the future. But one that they have tried to make work anyways is this economic policy uncertainty index. Okay. So it goes on to say, and I'm going to read this because I don't want to misquote it. How has uncertainty impacted the BC housing market? After a slow couple of years, home sales picked up considerably towards the end of 2024, driven by falling interest rates and pent-up demand. Sales began 2025 relatively strong, but fell off in February with further declines in March and April. Home sales are now sitting about at 25% below their 10-year average. This is in BC, okay? Given the fact that this fall off in sales coincided with the beginning of the tariff madness that has since gripped the global economy, it could be easy to simply intuit. That doesn't really make sense, that word there to me. Anyways, that tariff uncertainty is the main driver of weak sales. However, they pride themselves on trying to put some numbers behind things. You can't just say, well, this is how it feels and we got nothing to prove it. So
Tangible.
they relate back to that economic policy uncertainty index, okay? This model shows significant underlying sales momentum and a rate environment that has moved from weighing heavily on sales to being essentially neutral. The model also shows that uncertainty, while not usually much of a factor at all, is estimated to have lowered provincial home sales by approximately 3,000 sales over the first quarter of 2025 alone. The good news is that this uncertainty doesn't last forever. And this report's actually from May. The initial shock from uncertainty also appears to be fading. And given the, oh geez, I should have read this word before, tempestuous nature, I'll put that on the screen there, tell me how to pronounce it properly. Nature of recent tariff policy could be resolved one way or the other at any moment. When the uncertainty subsides, we should see greater clarity in the outlook and a pickup in activity. However, that also depends on the final shape of the tariff environment. So the one last thing I'm going to pop on the screen here is where they are predicting home sales in British Columbia to go, because it's quite interesting. They figured that they would bottom out right about now. Okay, so it's been on a decline. They figured they'd kind of bottom out right about now. There was kind of different models that they looked at in terms of like where they thought things might go. And the different models were no new tariffs, so existing kind of status quo, expanded tariffs with lower interest rates, or expanded tariffs with no changes in interest rates. Okay, so I'm going to pop that on the screen, but what it shows for the people that can't see it is that all three of these models have significantly higher sales than where we were in Q4 of 2024 and in the beginning of Q1 of 2025, where sales were much more normal than they are now. We're at about a 25% below average right now, right? These are much, much higher sales. Okay, now that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with prices, but more people buying homes, more activity in the market, could potentially lead to that. And it's easy, I think, to make that assumption that would probably happen. What comes after uncertainty? It says the Bank of Canada offered two scenarios for the economy under differing tariff regimes, the most negative of which assumes a year-long recession and rising inflation. But where does the market go from here? Well, like the Bank of Canada, they offer those scenarios and they think that we're going to have a significant increase in sales. Okay, so that's British Columbia. Now we know other areas in BC are not experiencing the same thing as the Fraser Valley. The Fraser Valley is probably the hardest hit area in British Columbia right now. But the question is that going to last, and will that last forever? Now, you're going to get into what's happening with prices relatively soon. We typically find that what you're about to share is almost like a lagging indicator of what's happening in the market. It usually feels like it's about 2 months behind. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the front page of the stats release from the Fraser Valley Board. So you see, I've gone from national to provincial to what's actually happening locally now.
Right.
The only thing I highlighted in here, the continued softening of prices may be encouraging some buyers back into the market. I'll continue. The Fraser Valley Board recorded 962 sales on the MLS in September, an increase of 3% over August. So it's improved month over month. 1 month doesn't make a difference necessarily. However, September sales were down 2% year over year and 28% below the 10-year average. September sales were only down 2% year over year in the Fraser Valley. What was not happening a year ago?
It was not having Donald Trump and
Yes.
tariffs.
Yes. So what that's showing me is that things have improved and things are improving. Now, is that going to continue on? We don't know. We don't have crystal balls, but a lot of the information, whether it's federally or from British Columbia Real Estate Association or from what's coming out of the Fraser Valley seems to suggest that things are slowly improving. So we'll have to see.
Exactly.
We'll have to see. So I know that was a ton of stats. What are your thoughts on kind of all that, wrapping that into a bow?
Oh, it's good, man. It's showing that it was interesting hearing about the psychology piece, because I do feel that there's a lot of emotions on buying, less emotions on selling.
Yeah.
And you have currently people who are they're in that middle process, the missing middle.
Right.
And the only way for them to move up is if they can, and someone has to buy their unit. So if you don't start that domino, or you don't start or clear the bottleneck of people, the first-time buyers, which then allow the first-time buyers before to go into the townhome, to the detached.
Right.
It makes sense where, we need to bring that back, and breaking that psychology, whether it's a certain percentage number or whether it's just anecdotally, like friends telling friends, hey, I'm thinking about buying my first place. Maybe they were on the fence. It's very interesting to see that. And just like you mentioned as well, we are getting more phone calls and we are getting more people interested. May not
Coincide.
coincide into per se them doing something, but at least it's starting the conversation. That's the most important part, because once the conversation started, then therefore it may become a reality. It may not be in 2 months, 4 months, or 6 months, but we are noticing, we are seeing that people are starting to have that conversation.
Yeah, that's actually the article you're referencing to was the most interesting one to me as well, because I think a lot of it is psychological. Obviously that uncertainty plays a big role, as we saw from that BCRA report.
Yeah.
With that being said, how long do you live in that world of this uncertainty until people say, well, I've been renting that extra, better part of a year, or or these opportunities exist now that may not exist tomorrow. They could improve tomorrow. We don't know. But we're always kind of looking at the data saying, well, where does it look like things are going? Where does it look like things are trending? And are people buying homes or not, right? So a lot of it is really interesting, because we are in a lower rate environment. We are in a place where people have opportunities to buy things that were maybe $50,000 more expensive a year ago. So those people are seeing opportunity and they're looking to capitalize on it. Because the one thing that we do know that we can always say is we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And there's lots of people that want to say, well, it'll get worse. But there's also lots of people that say, I don't know that for a fact, and I would rather go with what I know rather than guess.
That's right.
And they're maybe looking at this data and saying, well, some of it or a lot of it's maybe not pointing that it's going to be worse tomorrow. So anyways, it'd be interesting to see where it goes. Now, let's ruin all of these great ideas that the market's improving with what's actually happened with pricing. But again, we just went over this. We tend to find, even when we're actively working with a buyer in a market, we tend to find these numbers don't reflect the actual activity in the market. They seem to be just a little bit behind the 8 ball, so to speak. So nonetheless, these are the benchmark prices, kind of like measuring inflation, what's going on in these different areas. What's happening with the various product types across here?
So first we'll start with the 3 months, then we'll go into the 1 year change. So this will be 3 months back, if my math is correct. It'll be around July.
Right.
So prices from July till now within detached homes. Actually, we'll start with condos here. So condos in the Lower Mainland, we're at minus 2.7%, and in the Fraser Valley, we're at minus 3.1%, which is pretty on par for the rest of the product types. Lower Mainland townhomes minus 3.2%, Fraser Valley minus 3.5%. Detached rounded out, Lower Mainland minus 3.0 and minus 2.7 in the Fraser Valley. So most productive numbers kind of closer towards the detached apartments, and then the townhomes feel like they're losing, we'll say losing in quotations, their most value.
Yeah, and you know what I find interesting about that? Since the numbers over the last 10 years have gotten so high on real estate, that when we say like 3%, 3.5%, well, you take a townhouse that's worth $800,000, right? Like you're talking about a difference of like $25,000 or $30,000 over the course of a couple months.
Right.
Like 3% doesn't sound like a ton, but $25,000 sounds and feels like a ton to a lot of people selling. So, naturally they feel reluctant to adjust their value to what the market will absorb their home for, that buyers will actually get excited about it.
Exactly.
Which creates all these properties sitting on the market longer, right? So yeah, this is interesting that as the numbers have grown, 1% of $1 million is 10 grand. 10 grand feels like a lot of money.
Oh, 100% it does. Yeah.
So
That's right.
what's going on year over year?
Okay, year over year. So apartments in the Lower Mainland were minus 4.6, and in the Fraser Valley were minus 6.4. So this one here is going to be the biggest price adjustment out of all the product types.
Okay.
Townhomes minus 3.2% in the Lower Mainland, and in Fraser Valley minus 4.7, which is the best performing year over year. And then detached Lower Mainland minus 4.6, Fraser Valley minus 5.4. So right in the middle.
Okay, interesting. So it'll be really wild to see where that all ends up in the next couple months. Because if all the stuff we talked about, continues to be true, because it is true, because it's facts and statistics.
That's right.
If that all continues to be true, we've got another announcement coming up at the end of October. Who knows what'll happen, as we said, but there's a lot of people predicting that we get maybe one more adjustment before the end of the year. But you'll have to follow the news as it changes for that. But watch for those interest rates coming down below that 4% mark. I'm actually thinking maybe next time we do this, we really kind of get into how variable and fixed rates kind of works. I think people really misunderstand those. So that might be an interesting thing to go into. But yeah, it's a very interesting time to kind of feel what's happening. And, based on the volume that we do, we tend to get to see that and feel that maybe a little bit more than the average real estate professional out there. So all good. But anything you want to leave these lovely people with as we let them enjoy the rest of their day?
Same thing that I say every time is treat someone well and just do upon others that you'd want to do yourself. So we're going to continue. We're going to treat others well, and we're just going to make it through. And then we're hoping, but for everyone, we're hoping that the market gets a bit stronger, because I feel for the people who are stuck in their position because they have to wait for the next person to help them move into the next. I know for my situation, when baby number 2 comes, I'd like to move into our next home, but we can't do that until we have someone who wants to buy our house.
Right.
So let's just make it through, and let's hope for a better market coming up in the spring.
Yeah, and you know what? A better market is I believe good for everyone.
I agree.
There's lots of opportunity even with where the prices have moved for people, and I know some people want love the idea that they should be able to buy a detached home for much less than kind of what they are and whatnot. Our parents struggled with this same thing, and their parents struggle with the same thing, and everything feels expensive. And it's not to say that it's not. It's just, just remember that it's not about getting the dream home right off the bat. Nobody has done that, and you got to put yourself in a position to even be part of the conversation, which is getting involved.
That's right.
And I always warn people to be careful about timing the market, because it's going to fluctuate up, down, sideways, backwards, forwards, short term, as we always have seen, right?
Yep.
But every time we look at the graphs of where you're probably going to be 5 years from now, most people are pretty happy.
And it's all relative. Saying that you say, tide raises all ships. So if the prices go down on the detached, your prices go down on the townhome or the condo. But then again, if your prices start going up, it becomes a bit of a better market. Well, guess what? That next home is going to be more expensive as well.
That's right.
So it's all relative.
Yeah.
So don't try and time the market. Try and time your situation, maybe not time the actual market. So when it's right for you to make the move, make the move. It's not about the actual timing the market, because whatever is going to be the pricing, it's just going to be for the next home.
Well said, Matt. I think we'd screw it up if we didn't end on that.
That's right.
All right. We'll see you again next month.
You too, buddy.
All right. Cheers.
See ya.